Welcome back to NFL Fantasy Live. It's Wednesday. You know what that means. It is time for Stardom and Situm. And each week, this list is carefully curated by Michael F. Florio. And if he gets it right, you just shrug your shoulders and be like, this is his job. That's what he should do. And if it's not right, you're like, this guy's a clown. He's too old to be wearing Jordans. And that's what they say. That's not what I say. That's what they say.
I'll take it.
Hey, camera two, I'm sorry. Listen, first time hosting. Give me a break. You know what? For weeks, we've been doing a segment on the Thursday show, I think it is, where we do the Mahomes line. Because, he's not an automatic start. What are we doing with him this week?
I feel though more and more lately, he's gotten higher and higher up there because he's been putting up numbers. And his transformation this season happened in week 8 against his Raiders team. Since that point, 21 fantasy points per game. In his career, he averages 24 per game against the Raiders. And look, he's just getting more passing touchdowns, 3 or more in 3 of his last 4 games. That has translated to a lot more fantasy success. The Raiders have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game and most touchdowns in the last month. So I think Mahomes stays hot. You're going to be watching him on Friday. Might as well get him in your lineup.
There you go.
And then I know you have CJ Stroud.
CJ Stroud, what do we got? What do we got? Are we sitting him?
You're starting CJ Stroud. There is no way you could get away from him this week. The biggest thing is he has been under pressure at the 2nd highest rate this season. The Jaguars, though, generate pressure at the 4th lowest rate, so he should have time to throw. They are also top 2 in passing yards and touchdowns. They've allowed the most fantasy points per game. And last time Stroud played him, his one big game of the year, 23.5 fantasy points over almost 350 passing yards, and he averages 25 against them in his career. So if you're not starting him now, why is he on your roster?
It's wild. Well, it's funny because I posted the video yesterday, and some guy on the Twitter, he's like, oh, he's been garbage the last 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, well, it's for this week.
Yeah.
We're talking about this week is when we're starting up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Somebody who's coming off a huge game last week, Tua Tagovailoa. Tougher matchup against the Green Bay Packers this week in the cold. What are we doing with them? I
think for exactly the reasons you just said, we are
sitting... Did I take your whole point? I'm sorry.
No, you are good. We are sitting Tua Tagovailoa because you see there, less than 11 fantasy points per game in sub-50-degree games. That is 6 passing touchdowns and 11 giveaways. And it is going to be below 30 degrees at kickoff on Thursday night. Plus, Green Bay allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game in the last month to quarterbacks, and they excel at taking away the middle of the field.
Yeah.
That is where the Dolphins' passing attack excels. So I don't love the matchup and the cold weather.
Yeah, but you make a big deal about the cold. He's from Hawaii. You know what? I hate to sit here and take a victory lap on Bucky Irving. I mean, not enough to keep me from doing it, because I'm certainly going to sit here and do it. But the matchup this week is against the Carolina Panthers. You teased it earlier in the show. What are we doing here?
Yeah, you're starting him, and kudos to you, Rank. You were in on Bucky Irving before the season even started, so that looks like a phenomenal call right now. Marcus said he loves him this week. I do as well. He is seeing more pass game work. He already gets a ton of volume as a runner. 15 or more fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 games. That is just production that you need to start. And then Panthers top 2 in yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points allowed to running backs. My boy Chase Brown.
There it is.
I know, tough matchup against the Steelers. I don't care. I've been riding with Brown all year, and it just keeps getting better and better. 18 fantasy points per game since week 4. 23 per game in his last 3. Great usage, 27 touches per game in his last 4 games. That leads the NFL. Steelers might not allow a lot of yards, but they do allow a lot of rushing touchdowns. They have struggled against pass-catching backs, and they've allowed a top 8 fantasy running back in 4 of their last 5 games. So
I love
what
you're saying. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I enjoy all the words that were coming out of your mouth right there. Sometimes you have a tough matchup, and you start him regardless because that player is good. Talk to me about DeAndre Swift then.
I think I'm going to get in your bad graces right here, but I'm not going to be alone because Marcus also has already said he is afraid of this match.
I'm standing on the other side of the room now.
But I'm in agreement with Marcus here. I think, look, the production has dipped as of late. Just 12 fantasy points per game in his last month. Even more concerning, Roschon Johnson is getting goal line looks now. And if he is stealing touchdowns away, that really hurts DeAndre Swift. And then the matchup. Lions have allowed the 4th fewest rushing yards, 2nd fewest receiving yards, 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. And they limited Jonathan Taylor last week to 3.5. Swift and Taylor are always linked together, so it's just funny to me that they play the Lions in back-to-back weeks.
That's understandable. One of the things about the Lions, though, that they allow quarterbacks who can run give them a problem. It's one of the reasons why last year the Chicago Bears did so well against them is that Justin Fields was really a thorn in their side. And over the last couple of weeks, we've seen Caleb Williams really take advantage of the running lane. So I do think there's an opportunity for DeAndre Swift. I understand if you're playing the matchups, no team's on a bye, but I think DeAndre Swift, you should start him. Wake up, everybody, because it's time for Sleepers with Marcus Grant.
Thank you, Adam Rank. Yes, we got some sleepers for Week 13. We got quarterbacks and running backs here. We're going to start with Russell Wilson. Now, Rank at the top of the show mentioned that he was concerned about Russ, and it's understandable because 2 weeks ago against the Ravens, we said start him, he's going to crush, and he didn't. And then last week against the Browns, we said, hey, it's a good matchup, and it wasn't, especially when
You're the Commanders, too.
There's the Commanders as well. This week, though, I'm going to give you scientific reasons why Russell Wilson is a sleeper. More than 260 passing yards in 3 of 5 games, 7 TD passes, just 2 interceptions. The Bengals, the third best matchups for quarterbacks this season. They are bottom 10 in the league in QB pressure rates. And Wilson has the third highest passer rating when not pressured, minimum 100 pass attempts and all that sort of thing. Now we move over to the Los Angeles Chargers and Gus Edwards. J.K. Dobbins dealing with a knee injury, expected to miss some time. So this means more opportunities for Gus Edwards. Volume is really going to be key here because the matchup really isn't necessarily a great one. Atlanta is just sort of meh against the run. They rank 18th in rushing defense, just 6 rushing touchdowns allowed. The issue is Kamani Vidal has been a healthy scratch for much of the season. Hassan Haskins has been ineffective when he has been on the field. So this looks like the Gus bus loading up and taking a lot of passengers to victory in Week 13 for fantasy football. And finally, a deep sleeper at quarterback. We're going to go Bryce Young. Hey, maybe in a weird way, the benching sort of helped him. The first 2 weeks of the season, he had 11.6 total fantasy points since he has come back from his sabbatical, I guess. 13.7 fantasy points per game. And that's considering he's faced some really good defenses since Week 8. Going against that Buccaneers pass defense that we have picked on all season long. 8 different quarterbacks have had top 12 finishes against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Time now for FedEx Air and Ground Rankings presented by, strangely enough, FedEx. Your FedEx Air Player of the Week, Tua Tagovailoa. You see it there, 317 yards, 4 touchdowns in the win last week. I know that Florida didn't like him this week, but that was last week. We're bringing up old stuff. Meanwhile, Saquon Barkley, peek behind the curtain. Apparently, you guys voted for Jordan Addison as the Ground Player of the Week. Low information voters were going to leave Saquon Barkley out of the throne for this week. He was fantastic. More yards than the New York Giants. How was he not the Ground Player of the Week? Thankfully, that wrong has been righted.
Welcome back to NFL Fantasy Live. Brock Purdy, is he playing this week? Well, guess what? Kyle Shanahan is not going to give us a straight answer. It's kind of like trying to ask one of your kids, like, did you eat all the fun? Oh, there we are, camera 2. I'm sorry, I'll get it. I'm getting there. We're moving. What does it mean for the wide receiver position? Juwan Jennings has been so great this season. Are we starting him?
Yeah, with Brock Purdy, he is a must-start option, but I think he's in play either way because, one, he has been elite this year when Purdy plays and one of Debo or Ayuk is out, 29 fantasy points per game. But I think this is just a matchup that fits his strengths. He is 6th in the NFL in yards for split safety coverage. The Bills use that at the 3rd highest rate. He leads the Niners in yards against zone. The Bills use that at the 6th highest rate. So must start with Purdy, but I still think in play even if Purdy is out this week.
I don't know if you remember this, but during the offseason, everybody was telling the Bears, like, oh, you should trade Caleb Williams' rights, get the haul, and bring in Marvin Harrison, which means to me that Marvin Harrison would have to be a must-start each and every week, right? You would think, right?
And we saw at the start of the show, best matchup for wide receivers is the Vikings. I think it is a trap this week. I'm saying to sit Marvin Harrison Jr. 1, he has not been a must-start every week. Less than 8 fantasy points in 5 of his last 7 games. He has not finished as a wide receiver 1 since week 3. But the Vikings, yes, I know they allow yards to wide receivers, but they use split safety at the highest rate in the NFL. Kyler Murray is 27th in passer rating against that coverage, and Marvin Harrison Jr. has just a 52% catch rate against it. It feels like a big trap to me this week. And then Jalen Waddle. I know I had him as a sit last week, but none of you could say anything to me because all of the comments were like, who would ever start Jalen Waddle?
Right.
He went off on all of your benches, I know, but I'm not chasing.
Wait, did you have him as a start last week?
No, I had him as a sit. And everyone was why would you start him? But, sit him. He's not going to do this again. The Packers have been tough against wide receivers, the cold weather, all of that. I'm not chasing the point.
The last time he had a game like that was 2022. Not 2023, 2022. It was like a reasonable thing. Also, what's reasonable is the band Hold Steady. Hold Steady, Ybor City. You're up to your neck in your red, white, whatever. Kate Otten, Kate Otten has been great. No. Tell me when we're starting Kate Otten. You will not let me down.
We are starting Kate Otten here because, look, I know last week he disappointed, and a lot of you were like, is it because Mike Evans is back? It could be, but I think it was more because he faced the Giants, who have been tough against tight ends all year, second fewest fantasy points per game. The week before that, he had the 49ers, who are really good against tight ends. Now, he gets the Panthers, who've allowed the most fantasy points per game, most touchdowns, third most yards to tight ends. If he disappoints this week, then maybe we can have a conversation. And Taysom Hill. You saw what he did last time he played, over 41 fantasy points. I don't think he's going to do that every week, but 10 targets should not be ignored. Goal line carries should not be ignored. And the Saints coaches came out and were like, yeah, we're going to continue to use Taysom Hill in this way. So the floor might be low, but the upside is so high. I would rather play him than like Tucker Kraft, Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews, Laporta, Pitts, all of these guys, because just so much more upside.
No, you want to be playing for upside at the tight end position. But I got to ask you, when you look at everything that's going on in Jacksonville, AEW, the best it's ever been. The Jags, not so much, but what does that mean for Evan Ingram?
Very different levels of success there. I think it means you could get away from Evan Ingram. And I was surprised to see Trevor Lawrence is trying to play this week. I don't know if I would expect him to play, though, but in 2 games without Trevor Lawrence this year, 34 yards per game and just 9 fantasy points per game. Now he gets the Texans, who've allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends, and Ingram has never scored a touchdown against them in his career, so with the yards being down, no teams on bye this week, I think it is fine to try to get away from Evan Ingram this week.
I don't blame you for that one bit, but let's get some more sleepers with Marcus Grant.
Let's do some more sleepers indeed for Week 13. We've got some pass catchers coming up in this round, and yes, tomorrow might be Thanksgiving Day. Sunday's going to be Thanksgiving Day. We got Tank Dell on the menu as a sleeper. And yeah, it's sort of been up and down with the Texans offense and their passing game. But since Week 9, Tank Dell leads this team in targets. Yes, I know Stephon Diggs got hurt and Nico Collins was out. That doesn't change the fact. Collins' return really hasn't significantly hurt his target share, 5 or more in 4 straight games. The Jaguars, the second best matchup for wide receivers this year, 4th most receptions, 2nd most receiving yards allowed to the position. Then coming up, Hunter Henry, who might be Hunger Henry because he's going to eat. Coming up this week against the Indianapolis Colts, leads the Patriots in receptions and receiving yards, a 20% target share this year, 6 or more targets in 5 of the last 6 games. He's led the Patriots in targets 5 times this year, going against the defense that is the 3rd most receptions allowed to tight ends. And then for a deep sleeper, I don't have a Thanksgiving pun for Quentin Johnston. Look, I get it. It was a horrific game for him on Monday night, right? He 5 targets, no catches, had a terrible drop. It was in prime time for everyone to see. But you know what? He's still getting a lot of work. 18% target share in the games that he's played, 6 games with 5 or more targets. And the Falcons have been pretty forgiving. 4th best matchup for wide receivers this year, 5th most receptions, 3rd most touchdowns allowed to wide receivers. So I'm thinking that last week, more of a blip on the radar, and that the Quentin Johnston we've seen for much of the season, who has improved, is the guy who's going to show up again in Week 13.